Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. Jazakallah khairan kathira for coming today. We will start the webinar by the recitation of the Quran. And so I will inshallah invite Sister Shahida Nuzhat. She has completed her Quran diploma course from Ad-Doha Department of ICNA Sisters. And she has been connected to ICNA Sisters for 6 years. She is presently the Tajweed, which is teaching you how to read Quran properly in proper pronunciation. She's a Tajweed teacher of the ICNA Department of Ad-Duha online course of the Toronto campus. And she's also a president of the Melbourne unit. So please, Sister Shahida, the mic is yours. Please come and start reading the Quran. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam, Sister Shahida. Please,
Okay.
we can hear you clearly. Jazakallah khair.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلووا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا. Surah Nisa, ayah number 135. Believers, be upholders of justice and bearers of witness to truth for the sake of Allah, even though it may either be against yourselves or against your parents and kinsmen, or the rich or the poor. For Allah is more concerned with their well-being than you are. Do not then follow your own desires, lest you keep away from the justice. If you twist or turn away from the truth, know that Allah is well aware of all that you do. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khairan kathiran, Sister Shahida, for your beautiful recitation. I just wanted to give a short summary of this ayah that we picked, so that we understand why this ayah was picked. It is all about, in Islam, justice is a very important aspect of the deen of Islam. And so, of course, knowing your rights is all connected to justice. So we all always want to look for justice. We always are happy when there's justice all around us, not only in our families, but all around in our countries, in wherever we live, in any aspect, in our work, in our schools, in our education system. So we all love justice. But this ayah tells us, it's a warning from Allah, which is God, our creator, that, these are some of the places where we break justice. So before we start the webinar and to know about our rights, we thought it was very appropriate for us to know where are the places where we break justice. For us as Muslims, it's very important that we follow justice and ask for our rights, but we also don't give others the rights. And in this ayah, Allah subhanAllah, in just few words, Allah has, our Creator has given us all the ways that we break justice. It is when it's concerning, be just, Allah says, even when it's, and be on the side of the truth, even if it's against your own self, your parents, and your family members. Plus, don't get concerned don't get affected, bend down justice or the rules and regulation when it is somebody rich, because, we get affected when somebody has power and we bend justice for them because, we want to be connected with them, or they might have some control over us. Or if somebody is poor, also sometimes we think we are being kind to somebody who's poor by breaking the laws because we think, it's like a misplaced compassion. So don't do that either. And don't follow your own desires. That sometimes leads us to be unjust, and that would take you away from the justice. And if you distort the truth, Allah is saying that they don't change the truth or decline it in a mean that you see the truth, and then you stop. You don't want to be a witness to the just or the truth that has happened, and you follow your desires or the lie. So don't be like that, and know that Allah is fully aware. So you know that your Creator is constantly watching you. So all of these are the areas that we break our rules and regulations. So we thought there was a very appropriate ayah to start this whole webinar today. So now, before we start anything else, I will try to do the land acknowledgement. Because, this is the important thing to do. This is part of where we are. So let me just read it out. We acknowledge this land on the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, sorry, it's a little hard to pronounce, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And this land is now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples from across Turtle Island, whose resilience and presence continue to shape our shared community. We also acknowledge the Black people who came here involuntarily as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And so we honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of the African descendants. Decolonization is not a metaphor. We cannot say we are committed to decolonization and indigenization in Canada while still supporting settler colonialism elsewhere. Sorry, I get mixed up. This includes the struggle for self-determination in Palestine and so we acknowledge the plight of Palestinians marked by an enduring, unjust, and devastating 75 years of occupation. We also acknowledge the grief and loss felt by our Jewish and Christian allies in occupied Palestine and here on Turtle Island and around the world, and their commitment to co-resistance and liberation for all. We recognize that words alone are insufficient. It is our collective responsibility to work towards healing, reconciliation, and justice, ensuring that the principles of respect and cooperation guide our actions on this land and beyond. So with this, we start our webinar. I just forgot to introduce myself. My name is Zakia Suleiman, and I work, I'm a volunteer. I'm a volunteer for ICNA Sisters. And I've been part of ICNA Sisters for the last 16, 17 years. And just like Sister Shahida, who beautifully read the Quran, we all got connected to ICNA Sisters through the Ad-Duha Institute, which teaches us our Quran. And once you learn the Quran, you automatically want to do something good, and then that's how you get connected to ICNA Sisters. So now let me introduce to you what is ICNA Sisters. So ICNA, which stands for the Islamic Circle of North America, ICNA Sisters Canada is a group of dynamic ladies who volunteer their time and energy because they believe in the empowerment and enrichment of women and children all around them. We have 100 and plus, we have 1,000 and plus members, more 1,000 and plus members, and more than 900 helpers. And we have 117 members of the General Assembly. We work all over Canada in 28 different cities. And we have created a number of different departments to fulfill different aspects of our work. So this webinar today has been brought to you by the Civic Engagement Department of ICNA Sisters Canada. Now, what does civic engagement means? Now, let me tell you that. Civic engagement enables us to work together collectively to accomplish goals, create a floor for social support for those who need them. We do this through volunteering and donations, and we bring it about and we contribute to the healthy democracy of Canada through civic and political engagement. So subhanallah, I have told you everything that I needed to tell you. But now, so I just wanted to give you some ground rules. So first, we've done all the acknowledgement and we've started with the Quran reading. Now we will have we mashallah have 2 lawyers today. And first it will be Barbara Jackman. She's an immigration and refugee lawyer. And then we will have Rani, who's a legal counsel and a legal lawyer. And then they will both give their presentation for a few minutes each. And then we will open the floor for question and answers. And so we will have the last half an hour or more for question and answers. So please feel free that you can type in your question and answers, and we have people taking them down. And if you are comfortable, after we answer the ones that I've written, we will have you will have an opportunity to open the mic and ask directly to both the lawyers a different question concerning you. And the reason we are holding this webinar today was because since we as a civic engagement department, many of the members and many of our friends and families reach out to us. They don't know what their rules and regulation are, what are their rights, how to act in a certain situation, how to act in a school situation or in any education department or at work or sometimes at home if they have trouble. So they're all of these areas have different rules and regulations to it. But we thought today we will invite 2 different lawyers, so as much so that we can fulfill the needs of our volunteers, our members. So that's why we've invited 2. And inshallah, if this goes well, we will have more lawyers come and give us more rules and regulations and laws that pertain to us. So we can, right now it's just these 2 departments because we just cannot fit everyone today in just an hour and a half. So anyway, so this was the reason why we are holding the webinar today. So inshallah, I will just introduce to you Barbara Jackman, our first lawyer. She is an immigration and refugee lawyer. So Barbara Jackman, a graduate of University of Toronto Law School, is a senior counsel at Jackman and Associate, practicing in immigration, refugee, and citizenship law in Toronto. She has appeared before all levels of court, provincially and federally, including the Supreme Court, seeking to advance human rights protections for non-citizens in respect of their status in Canada. She has argued a number of precedent-setting cases before the Supreme Court. She is a recipient of several awards recognizing her work, including 4 honorary doctorates, and is a member of the Order of Canada in 2019. She has been recognized by a number of immigrant and religious communities for her human rights work. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Barbara. Barbara, the mic is all yours.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
So I'm just going to sort of give an overview of where we're at with respect to immigration and refugee programs in Canada. And if people have questions about sort of specific situations afterwards, you can ask them. Not about specific cases, like I can't give legal advice here in a public forum because you're not supposed to do that. So, but if you have general questions, I don't have a problem answering them. Sorry, my voice has gone a bit. I started practicing law in Canada in the 1970s, and from the time I was a student, when I volunteered at the Center for Spanish-Speaking People in Toronto, I focused on immigration. So when I became a lawyer, that was sort of when the bar developed, the immigration and refugee bar of lawyers. There were a lot of us that graduated that started trying to help immigrants because there really weren't lawyers around that were helping immigrants or refugees to remain in Canada. So from my experience, I think the starting point with Canada's immigration system is to recognize that it's been racist and that it still is. If you look at the past, Canada had a single passage law. You had to come to Canada on one boat. You couldn't shift to another boat to get here. It had to be a single passage. And that eliminated Asian migrants from India because there was no single passage. They would have had to go one place, change boats, and come to Canada. A group of them hired a boat and came by single passage, but they were still turned away in 2014. And many of them were killed on their return to India. So they actually were refugees that Canada didn't accept. So they turned away another ship in 1939, the Mount St. Louis, which was full of Jewish refugees fleeing the Holocaust in Europe. And at least 200 people on that boat were murdered, having been sent back. So our refugee history has not been very good. Canada had a ban on Chinese migrants, like an explicit ban on Chinese because they were Chinese until 1947. And it wasn't until 1967 that Canada tried to establish what you would call an objective selection program where people got points for different things. So points for experience in jobs, points for education, points for family members. They've taken away the points for family members. However, if you just look at the refugee movements right now, I think it's fair to say that racism and preference of some groups over others continues. So, for example, Canada has approved 960,000 Ukrainian applicants, although apparently only 250,000 have come. You compare that to the Syrians, where Canada took 44,000 approximately, Afghanis approximately 40,000, Palestinians from Gaza 179. They can't even make 500. But there's no reason, there's no apparent reason why 960,000 Ukrainians could be processed that quickly and accepted, but not anybody else. So when I started practicing first in the late 1970s and early 1980s, Canada had 3 recognized streams of immigrants: economic migrants, family members, and refugee and social humanitarian class, a humanitarian class which included refugees. Today, I think it's fair to say that the primary category is economic. Family class and refugees are second class. So if you look at the family class program that was around in the 80s, parents or people here immigrants or citizens here could sponsor family members, so parents and underage children. Now the age is set at 22. That's always been the case, that you can sponsor your spouse and underage children. Back then you could sponsor your parents. Now we have a parental sponsorship program, but it's pretty illusory. Canada, it's only by lottery. You can't, it used to be you could go into immigration, fill out the form, sponsor your parents. Now you can only sponsor them by putting your name in a list and hoping that it gets pulled on a lottery. but the list isn't open and hasn't been for several years, so you can't put your name on a list right now, and you haven't been able to for several years. And the names that are already on the list, the last sort of lottery for those names was in May of 2024, so a month ago, and it only covered 3,000 parents. And there's way, way, way more parents of settled immigrants in Canada that would benefit from being able to reunite with their children here. In some cases, I mean, we've seen cases where there's like 6 children that have immigrated to Canada, and the parents were still a widow or a widower without anybody else back in their home country, and they can't get them to Canada. You can make a humanitarian and compassionate application, but you probably end up having to go to court to fight that issue about whether it is humanitarian and compassionate to let a widowed mother join her kids in Canada. Because although it was recognized as humanitarian when I started practicing, and indeed parents were sponsorable, it's not now. It's gotten tighter and more narrow as the years have gone on. The other thing was, which I am sort of upset about, is that people who weren't even parents but were close family members and were left on their own, like say you had an aunt, didn't have any children, everybody else in the family's in Canada, those relatives would usually be accepted on humanitarian grounds. They're not now. We used to also have programs like policies where they would accept last remaining family members, and they don't anymore. So having cut out parents, they don't even have a case-by-case sort of viable assessment program for parents that should be allowed to come forward to be with their kids. And what bothers me the most about that kind of program is, I know when I started practicing, the people that were running the immigration department felt family was important. I think family is important. I don't think the current technocrats that are running the department think family is important anymore. They're more concerned about making Canada an economic powerhouse by bringing in young people who can contribute to the economy. And of course, that's a good idea, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't let family members come. So the second area was refugees. And with refugees, I think there's a number of problems. One is who gets accepted. As I said, there's big differences depending on where you come from in the world. And those differences aren't just ethnic. They're also religious and political, perceived political differences. So for example, a lot of the work I've done over the years has been representing people who are victimized, such as Palestinians and Tamils, where there's a viable self-determination group that's engaged in violence. So you wouldn't expect, or you would expect that most Palestinians would support the PLO, maybe not politically in some ways these days, but that generally their organizations had support within the community. That was true with the Tamils. There was the Tamil Tigers that were fighting a war against the Sri Lankan government. It was popularly supported within the Tamil population. But because it was popularly supported, Tamils just got turned down for immigrating if there was any sign in their history that they supported the Tamil Tigers. Or for the Palestinians, any evidence in their history that they showed support for Fatah. I mean, Fatah, they used to overcome your involvement with Fatah on a case-by-case basis. I'm not sure that they do anymore. They certainly didn't with Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine or the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine or most of the other groups. And now as well, they are targeting people who supported, say, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. So it's in that part of the world, it's both ethnic in terms of where people are coming from and religious in the sense that the distrust is of Muslims, and political because they perceive those people who show support for those groups to be violent people, which is just really ridiculous. So the problem with the refugee process is that as time has gone on, the interpretation of who should not be allowed into Canada for political or because we don't like their views or the views of the organizations that they have supported has gotten broader and broader. So you don't have to join an organization in order to be found to be a member of it. If you showed any kind of support for it in any way, even just verbal support, you can be found to be a member of a terrorist organization and denied admission to Canada. I really think that that's one area where the community needs to sort of get the government to narrow the broadness of the definitions that they're using, because they're keeping families apart. They're separating people who present no threat to anybody and never have, and merely because they're part of a group that Canada doesn't particularly like or that the security service is concerned about, they don't get to come to Canada. The refugee process has over the years, for people who are making refugee claims, become more structured and defined. The national security has become less structured and broad, but the definition of who's a refugee, there's a lot of jurisprudence, there's been a lot of litigation in the courts, and so it's become pretty established and structured for people who want to make refugee claims. Overseas refugees is very much subject, like the inland process where you make a refugee claim, you go before an independent tribunal, it's subject to supposedly an objective assessment of the case. Overseas, there's no real monitoring or way of ensuring that people are treated fairly. And so that's why we ended up with 960,000 Ukrainians being approved to come to Canada and 179 Muslims, or people, shouldn't say Muslims because Palestine is very mixed in terms of its religious background, but Palestinians, 179 Palestinians from Gaza. It's just sad. I know there's problems getting out of Gaza, but Canada really has done very little to help. Very little, if anything. I think they're just waiting for people to walk into their office and then they hold up the application because they're doing background checks on people at a time when they shouldn't. They should bring them, give them temporary status, do your background check once they're safe and in Canada, not keeping them over there where they really are in an insecure situation. So that's sort of where we're at with refugees. There is a common definition, persons who are outside their country of nationality or former habitual residence, and for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership in a social group or political opinion are unable or unwilling to seek protection from their country. That's the general sort of universal definition that's used internationally. And then Canada has special programs where you don't have to meet the definition so much as fall within a class. And so that's like the Syrians and the Afghanis. And like I said, the numbers have been minimal in that sense. The problem with national security has only grown as Canada has processed more refugees. And like I said, I mean, we've been in court a number of times trying to attack the broadness of the definition. We've not been successful, but it's one of those areas where I think you just have to keep fighting until someone recognizes that it's unfair and it's discriminatory in its application towards different people. The area where Canada has expanded, and in fact I think has made it its primary immigrant class, is the economic or skilled workers class. So I don't do that kind of work, so it's not the kind of thing where I can give someone an opinion on whether they have a chance of immigrating under one of those categories. I go to court trying to stop deportations mostly, so I am not familiar with all the economic categories, the details of them, but there's a number of them. There's express entry where they look at your skills. There's provincial nominees because provinces need certain classes of immigrants, and so if you can get accepted by a province, you're under their program, you're likely to be accepted as an immigrant. Quebec has a special program. Atlantic provinces have special programs, trying to attract people to go live in those provinces because there's a population shortfall there, and it would help them to increase the number of immigrants going to their country. There's business programs like the startup visa, where they will give a visa to someone to start a business here. And self-employed people who can show that they can support themselves through cultural and athletic activities may be accepted in the self-employed category. And so there's a number of different groups, different categories like that. And I would say to anybody who's interested in seeing, first of all, making a refugee claim isn't the best option. If a person can fit themselves within one of the immigrant programs, it's a lot better. They process them in a very short period of time compared to others, and it's a much more straightforward process. So that's the way to go if you can. I would only use the refugee if you need to, because you can't go back to your home country and you don't qualify under any of the other programs. I think that in going forward, there's a number of things that need to be pushed or need to be advanced for the government. First, that they should put parents back in the family class. I just don't think it's fair with people who are elderly, where their kids have immigrated, to leave them on their own without their children. We've always let them come in, and I find it mean-spirited to cut them out now. It should be part of the program. I think that while I don't have a problem with an emphasis on the economic, I think that there needs to be a sort of a recognition that all three streams of immigration are equally important, and that in terms of processing, you shouldn't let parents sit for 7 years for a case to be processed and then bring in a skilled migrant in 6 months. It's not fair. That kind of mistreatment, I think, of people. I think there has to be a more even balance of refugees within the refugee groups themselves, and that Canada has to develop objective, rational assessments of who presents a threat to Canada's security, because most of the people that are identified as threats, they know are not threats to Canada, and it just destroys the lives of many families by not letting people stay here with their relatives for reasons of political, on political grounds. It shouldn't be there, that kind of assessment. The other thing I think that needs to be stressed with the government is that there should be more face-to-face contact with immigrants. Like, one of the things that when I started practicing, that they can't probably go back to that, but we used to line up, people would see immigration officers, they'd talk to them, the officer could assess them as a real person. Now it's completely done online, it's faceless, and it's so easy for someone to say no. It's so much harder to say no to a real person who's in front of you, who you can see is a good person, along with their family members. So that kind of, I do think that they should be going back to a program that recognizing the humanity of it. It's all about the movement of people, that it should be people on people contact. And I think that with the national security issues, there's got to be more pressure on the government to balance that out. I think those are sort of the main points that I wanted to make. I can certainly answer questions. Is that okay?
Yes, it's perfectly fine. We learned a lot already. To kind of summarize, I just wanted to ask a question. Is it 179,000 for Palestine?
Oh, 179.
Just 179?
Yeah.
Not even 1,000?
Well, the last time I checked, it was 179. No, it's not even like 500. They haven't.
That's horrible. I don't even know about this.
Completely horrible.
960,000 for the Ukrainian.
Yeah.
And only 179. Where is there such a big need?
And they were in
Anyway.
such a rush to get the Ukrainians those visas. Only, I think something like 250,000 have come forward. So they're handing out visas to Ukrainians that don't even want to come.
Wow, sorry, we're so out of it that we don't even know about these numbers. Thank you for telling us. So anyway, yeah, it was really amazing what you showed us. It shows how less we know and how much there is to learn. And I never knew that I kind of knew that the whole immigration laws are kind of racist, but I didn't know to this extent. And it's sad. It's sad. Like I know Gaza has kind of opened all our eyes everywhere, but this is another eye opener that we thought Canada is, such a nice immigration system, and because I came with my parents like 40 years ago, so I don't realize it, but they have kind of become really changed, and I know how difficult it is for many people now,
Yeah.
and especially what you were saying about the parents, like they don't let the family be united anymore. Being a family together is not important to them anymore. It used to be, but it has changed, and they just want Canada to be the economic powerhouse, and that's why they're just letting young people come. That's kind of sad. And another thing you mentioned was that they have a lot of mistrust of Muslim, and their it's a very broad restrictions about, even if you said something about some group that they think is a terrorist group. I mean, it hasn't even been decided only, and then that you lose your immigration because of that. And that's another eye opener. And another thing was that that parents could be waiting for 7 years, and a skilled immigrant can come in 6 months. Wow, that is that's so sad, and you lose your parents. I've known of so many friends who are waiting for their parents to come, and they can't somehow go, with being so busy here. And then their parents pass away, just waiting for it to be joined. So it's such a sad statistics, and it's unfortunate that we have such a discriminatory and racist government, unfortunately, and we didn't realize it. I mean, till now. I mean, eyes are opening slowly. This whole last 8 months, all of us are like seeing. So thank you for your letting us know about all this that I think most of us didn't know. I'm sure some who are in law and probably know about it, but I didn't realize it because I'm not dealing with immigration. All my family is here, so I don't know about that. But some friends have gone through it. So thanks a lot. So we will hold the questions for Barbara after Rani Khan's presentation, and then we will. And I saw some people asking if, I hope somebody is noting down the questions. So then, we can ask Barbara after Rani's presentation. So, so let me introduce Rani Khan to you. Rani Khan is a senior legal counsel and a legal manager at Human Rights Legal Support Center, where her work includes regular appearances in mediation and hearings before the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario. Previously, she practiced in a community legal clinic system, which involved frequent appearances at a variety of administrative tribunals. Rani completed her articles and began a career with the City of Toronto's Legal Service Division. She has a Master's of Law from Osgoode Hall, specializing in administrative law, and a Bachelor of Law for University of Windsor's Faculty of Law. Rani currently co-chairs the Law Society of Ontario's annual Human Rights Summit and is an instructor for the Osgoode PD Certificate in Human Rights Theory and Practice. So without taking up any more of your time, Rani, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Jazakallah khair.
You're most welcome.
So I had a PowerPoint presentation.
By the way, I know Rani since childhood. She's a good friend of my daughter.
Yes, thank you for that introduction.
Mashallah, I've seen her 2 daughters too. So it's nice to have, mashallah, I just admire our girls. They're so, mashallah, professionally able, and they've made such a good use of their, education, and they're all working and doing so much for the society. I'm just so proud of our youth.
Okay, I'm just going to pause sharing for a second because I have two screens here and I want to make sure I have my notes available as well. I should also say that part of the reason I accepted the invitation today was because Barbara Jackman was speaking, and I've been a fan of Barbara since I was in law school, where I did some research on some Muslims that were unfortunately involved with the rendition to torture, and she was representing them. So I learned a lot about her then, and so I'm very pleased and honored to be on this panel with her.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Okay. Oh, I'm gonna now share my. Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna.
We can see it.
Okay. Rather than putting it into slideshow mode, I'm just gonna keep it like this, because then what happens is it moves to my other screen where my notes are, and then it's difficult to follow. But okay, so thank you for having me again. As Auntie Zakia mentioned, I work for the Human Rights Legal Support Center, where much of my work involves bringing human rights claims on behalf of individuals who have experienced discrimination in Ontario. I also do some pro bono work with the Muslim Legal Support Center. And just a quick disclaimer, as Barbara indicated as well, we're providing general information today, not legal advice. Another disclaimer is that I probably won't keep to my time limit, so I apologize for that in advance. So I understand that so ICNA Sisters had sent me some questions in advance, and so I tried to cover those in the PowerPoint presentation that I'll be taking you through. So just to quickly go over those questions, so you kind of understand the framework that I'll be speaking to. The first question was, how does Canadian law protect Muslim citizens from Islamophobia and racism? What are our rights when we're exposed to bullying, hate crimes, threats, and any form of harassment? How can we combat Islamophobia and create more inclusivity? What are my rights as a Canadian Muslim hijabi? And what are my rights as a citizen more broadly, as it relates to the rights of others? For example, we're in Pride Month right now, so other communities that are marginalized and also seeking, their recognition and inclusion as well. So those are the questions that I've hoped to answer through the course of the PowerPoint. And then, of course, if there's anything arising from the PowerPoint, we do have the Q&A after. So I thought it'd be a good place to start is sort of having the one definition that we're all kind of looking to when we're discussing, what is Islamophobia and what our rights are around that. So it's an extreme fear of and hostility toward Islam and Muslims, which often leads to hate speech, hate crimes, as well as social and political discrimination. We see different manifestations of Islamophobia. I'll make this a little bit smaller so everybody can see the slide. And so just briefly, it's manifested in structural Islamophobia, and we saw an example of that in Barbara's presentation in terms of immigration policies and laws. So it's the institutionalization that has sort of an anti-Muslim slant to it, legislation, policy, things like that, that seeks to exclude Muslims. Then we have dialectical or rationalized Islamophobia, and that's where we see policies that are rationalized or seen to be put in place through the rationalization that there are stereotypes around related to Muslims, like that they are dangerous, for example, and so it's related to structural in that what flows from that is things like no-fly lists, over policing, racial profiling, things like that. And then we see it on the community level where it's things like anti-Muslim hate groups, anti-Muslim rallies, opposition to mosques being built, or expansion and construction of mosques, and vandalism of mosques as well. And we also see that in opposition to refugee resettlement. And then on the private or individual level, Islamophobia is manifested through the form of, harassment, violence, hate crimes, discriminatory comments and conduct. And that can be, you know, in the context of workplaces, schools, etc. In terms of one of the questions that was put to me was, what do you think the root causes of Islamophobia are? I think that's a really broad question, and I'm certainly no expert in, I'm not a social science or psychology expert, but, you know, certainly I have my theories, but I thought that, you know, taking us through sort of a brief timeline might help inform that discussion, right, as to where the root causes are. And, you know, if you go back to the roots of Islam, you know, where they started in Mecca, there was Islamophobia then, right, with the idol worshippers. And then that continued on in Medina with the hypocrites, and then with the death of the Prophet ﷺ, with those who were formerly Muslim and who apostated. And then we see it again recurring in the expansion of the Islamic Empire. So we see the Crusades, and, you know, Islamophobia is manifested, one of the root causes of that. Also in the Spanish Reconquest and Inquisition. And then the dismantling of the Ottoman Empire, and then, of course, the repression of Islam among the African slaves during the transatlantic slave trade. And then in our more recent history, we see this post-September 11th, where we've seen more modern, legitimized, and prevalent forms of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate. And more recently, it's been tied to the genocide in Gaza and anti-Palestinian racism. And so I've just put up some headlines here in terms of, you know, where we've seen serious forms of Islamophobia take place. So I was asked about how Canadian law protects Muslim citizens from Islamophobia and racism. So there's different legal frameworks that can apply here. There's the Charter, there's the Criminal Code, there's the Human Rights Code, and then there's provincial legislation and provincial and regulatory bodies that can be utilized as well. And it just kind of depends on the circumstances. So very briefly, the Charter protects you from government action. So whenever the government takes any type of action in terms of legislation, policies, practices where they are limiting your rights. So that could be the right to freedom of expression, assembly, religion, equality. Then you can bring, you know, a claim against them for breaching your charter rights. But it's very important, you know, to understand that government is very narrow in terms of like government and government action. So that really only applies to, like, you know, parliament, government agencies. School boards have been found to be exercising functions of the government, similarly universities in some cases, police as well. So there's a limited protection in that sense. Then I'm going to talk about the code, and then or maybe we'll talk about the criminal code real quick, because I don't really practice in the area of criminal law, but there are some protections, and they're very specific to, you know, the actions of others that relate to inciting of hate, hate crimes, criminal harassment, assault, and terrorism. But, you know, when you do go through the criminal justice system, then it's kind of taken out of your hands, right? It's prosecuted by the Crown, and that's the government, and the criminal code is applied to those individuals, and so you don't really have a say in that, whether it goes forward or not. The Human Rights Code applies if you feel you've been discriminated against in certain contexts, so housing, services, facilities, employment, vocational associations, and contracts. If you feel you've been discriminated against or you know, harassed, and it's linked to your code grounds of race, color, ethnic origin, religion, creed, etc., then you can bring a claim to the Human Rights Tribunal. But this would only apply to provincial actors. If the agency or the social area or context in which you're discriminated against occurs in the federal jurisdiction, then you would have to bring a claim at the Canadian Human Rights Commission. And then I've noted here provincial and regulatory bodies, and they can be useful in contexts where you seek to enforce your rights, or where you see discrimination, hate crimes, etc., occurring um, by certain professionals. So, for example, a teacher is posting discriminatory things on their social media, or a doctor, discriminates against you. Then you can complain to the college that regulates them. So the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, you can complain about the doctor there, or the College of Teachers, for example. I think so. Usually when I do these talks, the audience tends to enjoy my discussion around different cases, because you want to see how this plays out, right? Like, we're talking about all this legislation, and like, are there cases where people have brought forward claims like this at various forums? So I thought I'd highlight a couple. So there was one case, um, it's called Madker and Alabi, and this was at the Human Rights Tribunal, and it's basically a landlord-tenant issue. There were Muslim tenants who were moving out, and the landlord was looking to rent out that unit to prospective tenants. And so they were, scheduling appointments to show the unit to prospective tenants. But these were the current tenants that were there were very like practicing Muslims. So the wife wore hijab. They had a prayer space within their unit, which they needed to keep it clean and have it kept pure. And so they had requested from the landlord to provide them with a little bit of notice, like just send a text message or a call, maybe an hour before you're going to show the unit, so that my wife can put on hijab. We can clear up, the prayer area. So people, and if you don't mind taking off your shoes when you come, because we do use the area for prayer. And the landlord just didn't comply with that at all. And so they brought an application to the Human Rights Tribunal and were successful. It was found to be discriminatory, and that the landlord could have accommodated that request quite easily. So that's an example of, a creed-based or religion-based request for accommodation in the context of housing that was successful. There was another case where we can see sort of institutionalized or legislated discrimination that's happening to the Muslim community. And this is the Khalid and City of Mississauga Corporation case brought to the tribunal, which ultimately ended up settling. So it didn't go all the way to a trial. But what that case was about was there was a bylaw that prevented parking around Isna Masjid from the hours of 12 to 3 p.m. on Fridays. And, Mr. Khalid and some others brought this application against the city to say that's discriminatory because it directly impacts Muslims and, no other group. And I believe NCCM did apply to be an intervener in that case. And but again, there's no final decision because it looks like that was settled. So the city and Mr. Khalid and the others who brought the application were able to resolve that without litigating it all the way. And there was another case involving a condo board, Kamal and Peel Condominium Corporation number 51. And in this case, the condo board had scheduled a meeting on the evening of Eid al-Adha. And some of the Muslim condo owners felt that that was discriminatory because they couldn't attend because, that was Eid and they would be doing other things. But it was held ultimately not to be discriminatory because it was shown that, number one, the condo board wasn't targeting Muslims specifically. They were able to demonstrate that they had scheduled these meetings on other holidays like Diwali and other holidays. So that was one reason. And the second was that there was actually no negative impact to these Muslim condo owners because it didn't actually interfere with any of their religious obligations. So it wasn't scheduled at a time where they had to go for prayer, for example, or when they were distributing the meat or anything like that. So you do see from the case law that there is this balancing that's happening, and this the tribunal does strive to dig deeper and really learn, what's at the heart here in terms of, is there a negative impact that's actually happening as a result of, any limitation or inconvenience to you based on your religion. There's one more case that I thought I'd talk about is the Zena Labzine and Best Buy Canada case. So this was a case where the applicant was alleging that he wasn't accommodated in terms of scheduling. So he was not he was being scheduled to work on Fridays when Friday prayer, like Jummah, was occurring, but he was actually unsuccessful because he had not communicated to his employer and made a formal request that he needed to be scheduled after 2 or 3 p.m. on Fridays. So, you know, the Best Buy could argue that they didn't really know why he needed this time off, right? It just seemed like any other request that anyone else was putting in, not related to religion. So this kind of gives us some guidance in terms of the types of cases that we see at the tribunal where the law intersects with Muslims and in terms of what they're seeking. So we often see it in the context of accommodation, where we're seeking accommodation of our religious obligations, like prayer space or time off for prayers, or scheduling changes related to fasting and praying. Or we see it in the second context of discrimination. So in the context of discriminatory comments, conduct, racial profiling, or policies that have a negative impact on us. And if you do find yourself in a situation where you are seeking accommodation, then the lessons we learn are, number one, make sure that you make a formal request and make sure it's documented in writing, right? Because often clients come to me and they say, I did make a request, but it was verbal, right? So there's no documentary evidence to support that. Secondly, you want to ensure that when you're making the request, that it's connected to your religious beliefs and you demonstrate that, you show that. Okay. Because otherwise, if you can't connect your request to your code ground, then the Human Rights Tribunal is not going to take jurisdiction. Okay. And then thirdly, you want to engage in a dialogue, whether it's your employer or housing provider, because you have a duty on you to cooperate. In addition to, the housing provider or the employer having a duty to accommodate, you have to cooperate in that process. So if they're seeking additional verification or additional information, provide that, right? Have that dialogue with them. And consider alternatives or ways that you can self-accommodate. So if you can shift, rearrange your schedule with another employee, right? Switch shifts with them or something. That's a way of self-accommodating, right? To show that, look, you are trying to cooperate, right? You're not trying to interfere with the operations of the employer. And lastly, if all of that doesn't work, then, speak to a lawyer, get legal advice about enforcing your rights where they're denied. Okay. Similarly, if you're subjected to discriminatory comments or conduct, so not where you're requesting accommodation, but rather someone has said something to you that's Islamophobic or discriminatory, whether it's in an employment context or education, number one, report it. Okay, report it to your employer, report it to the school, whoever has authority to deal with that. Again, make sure that it's in writing and that you're documenting things. If you don't receive a response, follow up. And then, if there's no response or they haven't addressed your complaint in a manner that you feel is adequate, then look at getting legal advice and enforcing your rights. Okay. So what are your rights if you're exposed to bullying, harassment, hate crimes, etc.? So this is a hard question to answer because it's really going to depend on a lot of factors that are specific to the incident and the circumstances, right? Like who was involved? Is it a person? Is it an institution, an organization, the government, right? What occurred? What was said? What happened? Who did what, right? Where did it happen? When did it happen? And why? Like, what are the motives? What happened before, the alleged incident or conduct, right? And this is all important because it has to do with jurisdictional issues, time limitation period issues. So what that means is, with different legislation, you can only bring a claim within a certain period of time. So if, for example, the Human Rights Tribunal will only allow you to bring claims within 1 year of the date of the incident, right? But if you were to bring a claim in like a civil claim, you'd have 2 years. Criminal, it's different, right? So that's why timing is important. And in terms of, you know, where it happened and who is the actor, it could be federal jurisdiction, right? Or if it occurred in another province, for example. So that's why all of these this information is needed. And then, you know, you take the steps that we discussed, right? You make the complaint or you report it, you document it. If you don't get a response, or if you do, you work with, you know, that authority, whether it's the police, whether it's your employer, and you try to come to some resolution. And if that's not satisfactory to you, then you enforce your rights, okay? So some advice on dealing with bullying, harassment, discrimination, hate crimes, etc. So again, as I said before, you want to document what happened. You want to assert your rights. So in other words, you want to put forward, you know, what is your complaint? What are you reporting? How does it breach your rights or violate your rights? You know, what was said, provide all the details, provide the timelines, be as specific as possible. And then, you know, if need be, depending on the response, obtain legal advice and or pursue a claim. So what to do if someone you know is a victim of a hate crime or yourself, report it to the police, seek legal advice. And I've inputted the Muslim Legal Support Center here, their contact information, as well as my office, the Human Rights Legal Support Center. If it's related to your, you know, creed, race, color, ethnic origin, etc. If it's related to your advocacy or work around Palestine, then there's some resources there as well for reporting and getting legal advice and help. And then, of course, NCCM as well. They are collecting data as well on hate crimes, things like that. And, you know, hopefully through these channels, you are able to then get the advice that you need and then pursue a claim, you know, if you've been given the advice to do so, okay? I see that you're taking pictures, so I just waited before I went to the next slide. Okay, so combating Islamophobia, you know, how do we do that? How do we create more inclusivity? I'm a big proponent of education. So much intolerance and discrimination occurs because of ignorance and a lack of dialogue and understanding. So that's really important. Advocacy is important to combat misinformation and to lobby the government, right? To change the laws, right? And one recent example is lobbying within the Toronto District School Board, where they're now adopting, you know, anti-Palestinian racism as part of their anti-racism strategy, the broader strategy, and you know, including Nakba Day, you know, as one of the days that are commemorated. So it's through actions like that, like advocacy and lobbying, and working with other groups, which is building the relationships and allyship with other communities is important. So trying to find common ground with other communities and working towards anti-discrimination in all of its forms. We can't really be insulated in our thinking. We have to think broader in terms of the community that we live in. Hate crimes, discrimination, it does disproportionately target Muslims, but other groups as well. And so we have to recognize that. We have to work with them and genuinely be part of other movements within Canada. So your rights as a Canadian Muslim hijabi, you know, as I alluded to earlier, all of that legislation that was discussed, the Charter, the Criminal Code, the Human Rights Code, all the other legislation applies to you, right? But similarly, like you have those protections, but you also have duties as a result of that, right? So you cannot discriminate against other groups, right? And you have to ensure that other groups have the benefit of, you know, the right to equality and the right to be free from discrimination, et cetera, as well. And that kind of leads into the almost last slide, which are your rights more broadly as a Canadian citizen, right? Whether it's in the context of students, parents, working professionals, You know, their schools have a mandate under the Education Act to provide human development and sexual health education, right? So you can make your concerns known, but they have to do a balancing, right, of everybody's rights. They also have to ensure that it's a environment that they're providing an environment free, that's safe and like free from discrimination and that's not toxic. Similarly, employers have that obligation as well. You know, here we do run into what's called competing human rights because there may be other groups that have been marginalized historically within society, like the trans community or LGBTQ plus community. And so I've put some sort of like the general framework here that, you know, tends to be applied by a decision maker like a school board or an employer if issues arise. You know, in the context of maybe there's some training occurring, right, around trans and LGBTQ plus issues or awareness. And you know, some groups, not only Muslims, there are other groups as well, Catholics, etc., who, because of their religion, may not want to participate in that, right? And so you have these competing rights that are occurring. So some of the general principles that apply, and here we can only really apply general principles because every case is dependent on its own facts, right? As I discussed earlier in one of my earlier slides, like you really need to know the who, what, when, where, how, why, like the whole context, everything about each situation, right? But generally, like no right is absolute. There's no hierarchy of rights. So religion doesn't trump any other right, and any other right doesn't necessarily trump religion. What's really going to be looked at here is whether the core of your right is being infringed or is it maybe a periphery of that right. There might be sometimes statutory defenses that you know, a school can rely on or an employer can rely on, you know, that may allow the restrictions of your rights, right? And ultimately, the end goal is to try to reconcile the rights, right? And earlier I talked about, you know, how the audience usually likes to hear about some cases. So like historically, there are some cases where, for example, there was a case, it's Brillinger and Imaging Excellence, where it was a printing company who, you know, they print like business cards, invitations, things like that. And this was back in like 2000. They were asked by a same-sex couple to print their wedding invitations. And the company objected, you know, based on religious reasons that, you know, this went against their religious beliefs. And so they were taken to court. Ultimately, like it was found that, you know, because it was the company, um, companies or corporations can't, like they don't have the right to freedom of religion. But you know, there is some discussion in the case there about how, you know, you can't compel someone to do something against their religious beliefs, right? So there was sort of a leaning towards protecting religion more there. But as we move through the case law and we look at, there was a case from 2024 this year, very recently came out. There was some media around it. You might have read about it in some of the newspapers. But there was a case at the Human Rights Tribunal called Mad Wax Windsor. Basically, this was a trans woman who contacted this salon to get her legs waxed, and she was told that by the owner that it's mainly women that work there, and they weren't comfortable. It was some Muslim women that work there as well, and they're not comfortable doing that, and as well, they're not allowed to touch. You know, a male that's not, you know, related to them by blood, and so there were these objections to it. And so this trans woman was denied that service, and she brought an application to the tribunal, and she was successful in that the tribunal found that the salon had not done enough to try to provide that service, like recognizing that, you know, there are these competing rights, there are Muslim employees that didn't feel comfortable with that, you know, but was there any analysis, was there anything done to try to accommodate this woman? And they found that there wasn't, and it was quite a high award that was awarded there. So that's kind of the trend in terms of if you look at historically the cases and now what's happening, there is a move towards, you know, inclusivity of all marginalized groups, and you know, placing greater limits sometimes on religious beliefs.
So your
And
time is over, Rani.
okay, good. I made it within the time. So, and here's the
You
contact
went,
information.
we let you go a little bit over, so
Oh,
it's okay. It was very interesting, so I couldn't stop myself to bring, say, 5-minute line. I should have said it, but I just couldn't. Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot. I already learned so much. And yes, so interesting how everything works. And I don't know if it's followed to the teeth, like, all these charters and criminal code and human rights. And let's see, I mean, is it done properly? There must be so many things that go wrong in there too, but hopefully we hope for the best. And Jazakallah khair for telling us how to go about it, because sometimes we know something has happened and then we just don't know how to go. And yeah, making everything in writing, that's very important. So we learned that it has a formal request and then it's in writing, and then you show what has happened very clearly, and you keep trying. And if they don't answer, then at least give them 3 chances, and then you go for legal actions. And also, I liked how you said that advocacy and lobbying is a way to change the law. That gives us some power. Like sometimes you feel like you're powerless, but you're not. Um, and we've seen how going out. Even if it doesn't bring the change, at least people know about it. That's so important, that you find out what's the truth, because there's so many lies out there and so much evil outside that the only way to fight it is to show the truth and be compassionate. So yeah, alhamdulillah. So there is ways of changing it. We don't have too much time, so I'll right away go to the questioning. There's so many questions, subhanallah, constantly coming up. And so let's start. So there were so many. Okay, let me start with this one. Sorry, they wrote it down for me, so I'm just looking it up. Okay, for Barb, one of the question was, Barb, you can turn on your camera so we can see you when you answer. Thank you,
Sorry.
Barb. No, that's okay. That's okay. No problem. Due to the current condition, is there any changes in the status for bringing Palestinian refugees?
Well, Canada said that it would bring ones that have relatives, but it's not a very effective program, from what I understand. That cases are held up on background checks, unnecessary background checks. I think, I do think the community. There's been some degree of organization in the community around pressing for Palestinians from Gaza to be able to relocate to Canada if they have family members here. I think there needs to be more pressure put on members of parliament. Like maybe you should, through your organization, if you can, have everybody go visit MPs across the country and start putting pressure on them to actually bring Gazans from there, because they're not being processed. One of the things that can be suggested, and a lot depends on how the government treats the cases, but generally they should just bring people and then do the checking afterwards. They've done that before for refugee groups, but to do a background check on a Palestinian when they have no basis for assuming there's a problem with that Palestinian, from a security point of view, just bring them in, do the background check here. You can put restrictions on people or have them report, once every 6 months until they've done their background check, but get them to safety first.
That's so true. Yeah, that's and you want us to go to every different MPs. Like, what about all the letters we write and we sign up? Do they have any effect? Like, I don't know.
I don't know how
For
much of
8
an
months
effect.
now, I've
They're
been
taken
signing.
into account, for sure. They're taken into
Oh,
account.
they are. So it's good to sign. Like, there was a question about that too. Yeah.
But I know that other groups have organized, like they've said, all right, on such and such a date, everybody make an appointment to go meet their MP.
Yeah, we've done that. Yeah.
And these are the positions that we'd like you to advance when you have that meeting, to try and going to the Liberal MPs is probably the best, because it's governing party. But
Okay.
it's political. The whole thing is political.
Yes, everything is so much politics. There's another question: is what if someone's right? I don't know if it's for Rani or what what is someone's right if they are willing to attend a protest in favor of Palestine? The media shows that the police are arresting some protesters. So that scares many people from going. So Rani, would you know how that would apply?
So the question is around attending police protests and if there's an
No,
arrest? No.
Palestinian protests and police are arresting the protesters.
Right.
So what are the rights of the protesters?
Yeah, I mean, you have the right to peaceful assembly and freedom of expression, and if there are arrests being made, then you know, you can challenge that, right? If it's also going to depend on whether that arrest leads to a charge, leads to, you know, pursuing that in the criminal court. But it's always a good thing to get legal advice, right, and representation. And there are like there's the Legal Center for Palestine. I think in one of my slides, I have their contact information where they will assist individuals in those circumstances. So, you know, if you're ever in that situation, you want to make sure that you get legal advice. And often we're seeing now slowly, right, where that's happened in the past, that those charges are being dropped or
Yeah.
the party you're able to settle. But yes, you absolutely have the right to assemble and peacefully protest, not violently, right? Not in a way that you are hateful or saying anything that could be construed as being hateful or inciting hate, right? So just be careful. I believe the Muslim Legal Support Center had done a session on your rights as they relate to going to protest. So I would encourage everyone to go to their website. They might have a recording of it. Because that was a really good overview of sort of the criminal law around that and what your rights are. And there was some good practical information provided as well, like don't bring your cell phone because the police can access your cell phone.
Mhm.
Make sure that it's not like it's password protected rather than like you know, using your facial recognition
Yeah.
and things like that. Yeah, because then they can easily access it. So there's some good practical information as well as just know your rights around protests specifically. So I hope I answered that question.
I
Yeah,
think
and
the other thing is that they should always have, try and have as many witnesses around because
so
if
yeah, that's why
you have
everybody's taking a
a word
video all
against,
the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
yeah.
Because I go to protest and they also told us one thing is that they take the phone away so you don't know who to call, the legal aid that you need. So write the number on your arm. So we write the numbers of a lawyer on our arm so we can reach out because they take the phone away from you. And then how do you reach out to your family or
Yeah, and I
any
know
legal aid? Yeah.
yeah, some protests also have like legal observers attend.
Yeah.
And that's part of the witnesses having that. But
Yeah, the
you know,
Law Union of Ontario has a group that will go and monitor protests.
yeah, the Law Union and the Muslim Legal Support Center does as well. And they've been training lawyers to do that work as well.
Mhm.
Just to follow up to that, that might be of assistance to your audience, and that is that, you know, if you do attend a protest and you are photographed, you know, and it's posted somewhere, and then you experience negative consequences as a result, like we've been seeing this a lot, you know, where an individual is then alleged to be involved in, you know, anti-Semitic behavior or things like that, and they're put on a leave from their employment, and you know, pending an investigation, right, or they're terminated at the beginning, like very close to, you know, October 7th. This was happening more frequently, and just really rash decisions made by employers. I know a lot of those cases have ended up settling, but you know, if that does happen to you, or something like that happens to you, seek legal advice, because you do have rights. You can fight that. You can challenge that.
I just want to add that if you seek legal advice, is there a lot of monetary help involved? Like, do you have to pay them a lot or?
Yeah, so it's going to depend on the advice you get and you know, what the lawyer indicates to you. You might be able to just address it through asserting your rights, or they may agree to write that rights assertion letter for you or a demand letter for you. Like it's going to depend on the circumstance of each case.
But it also depends on who the lawyer is. Like if you go to a clinic, they don't charge money for talking for giving advice to people or for writing letters if it's one of the legal aid clinics. If it's a private lawyer, if you go through the Law Society referral process where you phone them and they give you the name of a lawyer to talk to who specializes in that area, there's I don't know what the amount is, but there's a limit on how much the lawyer can charge for giving advice if it's through that referral service. But there's a lot of free legal services in the city through the clinics.
Okay. So we
Yep,
can
and
just,
through the Muslim Legal Support Center as well, the clinics that are set up to assist with Palestine work as well. I had put some of them in my side, but we can always send it to you after, because I think Barbara has some contacts as well.
sure. Thank you. Yeah, that would be amazing because sometimes you just are scared to reach out because you think it'll cost a lot. So you don't know what to do, then you're just stuck. Anyways, we've taken a lot of, okay, yeah. What is for Barb? One more, and then I'll let the mics open and then people can ask. What is the stance of International Court and UN when they recognize Israel as a war criminal? Why not Canada? Why is not Canada letting victims? It goes to the same thing. Yeah.
It does, but I don't think that the International Court at the moment has actually given a final decision on whether Israel has committed a war crime. I think what they've done so far is say it looks like Israel's committing war crimes and to cease and desist immediately. Canada, as a result of what the International Court said on an interim basis, purported to stop arms sales to Israel. That's a matter that's before our court right now, the federal court, because there's an application where an organization is seeking an order from the court in Canada that would bind Canada. Canada should be bound by the International Court of Justice. It's supposed to be, and I think if they make a final decision, Canada would respect it. But up until then, they'll just do what they can to support Israel, which is what they seem to be doing.
Oh, okay. There's another general question maybe Rani can answer. Is that can't a private company deny a service to anyone without giving any specific reasons? That's their business and they have the right to deal according to their own choices. But I think in the example you gave us, that doesn't work out, right? With the salon, the same kind of thing.
That's right. So even though it's a private business, it is in the business of providing a service to individuals. And so that is a social area that is captured within the Human Rights Code. And so you have the right to equality or the right to be free from discrimination within, the context of provision of goods and services.
So then you can't do that. Somebody asked.
So if someone was denied service, but not related to their religion or any of the code characteristics like race, color, ethnic origin, sexual orientation, disability, etc., if there was another reason, like I don't like your glasses, for example, then you could certainly discriminate on the basis that you don't like their glasses. But where it's linked to disability, for example, or a code protected ground, then that's where the limits are. You cannot do that.
Okay, I will, there's a lot of more questions, but I will open the mic because we don't have too much time and then the audience gets very upset if we keep asking and they don't get a chance to talk. It's happened in other webinars. So I will open the chat for anybody who wants to unmute and ask either one of the lawyers. You guys are most welcome and thank you for attending, but you can ask now. Oh, Saima Sohail has her hands up. You want to ask, Saima, by unmuting yourself? You have your hand up. Saima? Please go ahead. Okay, she's trying.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum assalam.
Ji. I know I was asking questions in the chat as well, and there is a question for Barbara as well. And again, it's the same continuous what we have, what I'm trying to ask. Is there any way legally that we can open an option in the immigration system for war victims?
You can lobby the government for a more effective program. If you the problem, Simon, with going to court is that, you know, if you argue that they are not being fair to Palestinians compared to others, you have to have the evidence to prove that. So you have to have sort of statistics, and you have to show that it's intentional against Gazans. Or maybe not have to show it's intentional, at least the effect is to discriminate against Palestinians from Gaza. That's a huge undertaking to try and raise that kind of a challenge in court. It's not to say it can't be done, but it's very complex because they treat different groups differently. So you can't say, oh, everybody's getting treated one way and not the Gazans. They treat the Afghanis the same way. I mean, it would be, it's very
I do.
complicated.
I
You're
do
better
get it,
to lobby.
but is there like that is a very big scenario for a normal person like me who's just a housewife or a working woman, a normal working woman? How about like if we could send emails or application forms or any kind of petitions to the government? Would that somehow or somewhere help in that manner?
People have been sending in the forms, and I think if you do submit the forms, just go to your member of parliament, keep bugging them. They can get it processed.
Okay.
They're more effective than lawyers, the members of parliament from the governing party.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. And there's one question for Ronnie as well. I do what we have been seeing on the media as well. Like where the students of different universities, they want to raise their voices, and in the university camps, they have been trying this, but their voices are being lowered in the protest. So, can you give us any suggestions over there? Can you open like anything? Can you tell us the right way to of doing things, maybe? Because there was one news of University of Alberta in Calgary that students were had their camps over, had their tents over there overnight, and police just came in and forcefully removed their tents and tear gassed them. So, what is a Canadian student right in that manner?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we see right now, you know, what's happening at U of T with the injunction to try to have the protests, the encampment ended there. But you know, that's gonna students have options, right? So they can pursue the police conduct, the negative police conduct with the police. So earlier I spoke about administrative bodies. So there used to be called the OPIRD. Now it's LECA. What does that acronym stand for? I need to look it up. But it's basically where you bring police complaints. So it's the Law Enforcement Complaints Agency. That's what it's called, LECA for short. So if you want to complain about individual officers and their conduct, and with the purpose of seeking like discipline, right, against them, or some kind of investigation into their conduct, then you can complain there. If the students feel that they are being targeted because of any of their code grounds, and you know, certain students are being targeted in a different manner or a worse manner than other students, then they could bring a human rights claim. They can look at bringing a civil claim, attacking on the human rights piece to it as well. Civil claims in terms of like torts, for, you know, any injury or harm that was caused to them. And then they can engage in processes within the school as well in terms of appealing decisions that relate to their, you know, academics, or like if that's being impacted. So again, you have to look at what's happening to the students, and then looking at like a strategy in terms of how to challenge what's happening to them, right? In terms of the negativity that they're experiencing, whether it's from police, whether it's from the school, whether it's from, you know, others that are there, because I know there were counter protests, right? But as I indicated in my presentation, like you should always seek legal advice first and then look at what options you have, right? Because there are different forums that you can bring your claims in, and you know, that will give you some sort of education and information on what claims to pursue and where.
So I just to make everybody understand that what the students are doing is their right. So they have the freedom of speech, they have the freedom of actions, and they're doing it all legally okay. Like they're not doing something wrong. Like many people are thinking that what the students are doing are wrong, but we all know they're not, right?
That's correct, and it's happened
what the
historically
police
in
and
the
what the
past.
schools are doing is what's wrong. It's the opposite. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot to making us understand. We'll take one more question from Aisha because she had her hand up, and then we'll have to go to our next section, which is the dua and end. So Aisha, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. I have
Walaikum
a
assalam.
question regarding a family friend of mine. They had the immigration of Canada in 2011, and they took the immigration and came here and got the immigration, but they went back to Saudi Arabia from where they came, and they came with two kids, one boy and girl, and they had a baby again there, and the wife had an issue with the family take caring of her mom. There was no one to take care of her mom, and she has a cancer, everything. So she was being with her there and take caring of her, and she never came back to Canada. And they expired their PR, and they did apply in 2016 for the visit visa for the kid, but they had the newborn baby. And immigration, they deny it. They didn't give the immigration like the visit visa to the kid since the parent didn't have the immigration expired PR, right? And the parents want to come now by road, but how they should come, it's a question for Barbara, I think, how they can come to Canada, but the mom doesn't want to leave the kid, right? He turned like 11 years old now, so there's no one to take care of him there and back home. So how they can come? So I just want to ask her: is there any option there, like so that they can bring the child with them?
Well,
Because the visa. Sorry.
I was gonna say couldn't they reapply? I can't give you specific advice about the case because I don't know the circumstances, but the one option is reapplying to immigrate and include the child. They're trying
The
to
whole
assert-
family, you mean? Sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Okay.
to
Because
make it
since the family,
application.
they had the immigration, right? They had the PR,
So they
so they have to
qualified
lose
once
that.
before. Well, it sounds from what you said like they lost it. If they didn't file an
Re-
appeal, they had an appeal from a
Yeah, they do have it.
They
But
have
it
to-
expired. It expired in 2016, the
Right,
PR.
but didn't you say they went in and someone did, if it wasn't taken from them, if one of them shows up at the border, then like through the US or something, they can ask to be admitted as a permanent resident. If they're not, then they have an appeal from that. So they might be let into the country for the appeal, but it would mean the family's separated while that's going on. I don't know how you're going to get a whole family into the United
Yeah.
States to get to the Canadian border because the Americans are not likely to give visas to everybody.
Yeah, no, American, they got the visit visa, family visit visa for America, but for the kid to bring here to Canada, how they should approach, like without any visa or anything, how can they approach? Because the immigration, they deny their
They
visit
already
visa for the
denied the
kid.
child a visa, so the child's not going to get a visa, I don't think.
Oh, so then how can they
But
come? Is there any
parents-
option?
If the parents still have permanent resident visas, they can show up at the border, at the land border. They won't be allowed on a plane and insist that they're still permanent residents. But, that's a very difficult case to make if they've been out of the country that long. Their chances of winning on an appeal are really poor. In fact, I would say almost zero if it's been that many years. And the best option would be just to reapply like they did the first time to become immigrants.
Oh, okay, okay. For the entire
Thank
family,
you,
you mean?
Aisha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're taking
But
too
I
much
don't know
time. We
their
have to end. Yeah.
circumstances. I
Sorry,
know.
Aisha.
They, just what Aisha, what they should do is go consult a lawyer rather than having you ask me the question in this.
Yes,
Right?
yeah. It's
They
an
need-
Yeah,
individual
they did,
case.
they
Yeah.
did, they did. I just want to ask you to, since you're the like the humanitarian lawyer and all, you deal with it. So that's why I just wanted to ask. They
Thank you,
did,
Aisha. Yeah.
like, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Aisha. That was very,
Thank you
yeah.
so much, Babar.
You're most welcome. Yeah, you're most welcome.
Thank you.
Can we move on? There was one last question that I thought was very good, but it's okay now. We don't have time. We have to end it. And I just want to thank you guys a lot for coming and giving us your legal advice. That was really eye-opener for me. I am sure it was for the rest of them. Even though we think we know, but we don't know anything. And inshallah, we will continue with more webinars similar to this so that, we are here to help each other and we are here to empower each other, ICNA sisters especially. So this is one of the way we empower. And once we know our legal rights, then it will be easier for us to fight for it. And we need to be united for sure for that. So I'm going to do the dua before we end, and then inshallah, we'll say our goodbyes. So, Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. I have a very nice dua that I found online, so I thought I'll just read it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from those who wear the mask of kindness, but their hearts are filled with venom. May Allah protect us, or our Creator protect us from those who offer their help with hidden agenda, from those who smile in our faces but plot our downfall in the shadows. May Allah, our Creator, protect us from those who seek to take our peace, our strength, our very lives. May Allah, our Creator, protect us from the evil eye of those who envy us and from the tongues of those who slander us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the malice of those who wish us harm. May Allah protect us from all that is evil and harmful and surround us with those who are truly good and kind, those who are here to heal us, to help us, those who will lift us up and make us stronger and guide us to the path of righteousness and peace. Ameen. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakallah khairan kasiram, and thank you, Barb and Rani. It was amazing having you guys here. And thank you for the audience to coming and joining us in the webinars and the interesting questions you've all asked. So we will end with that. All the best. Thank you. Maybe see you more and more webinars, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.